The boardroom fell silent when Marcus Chen walked in holding a child's hand, a child no one had ever seen before. 10 years ago, he'd left a 5-year-old boy crying on a hospital bench, choosing a merger over staying through the night. Now that boy stood beside him, 25 and composed, wearing a visitor's badge that read, Dr. Julian Reeves. Marcus's voice cracked when he said, "I'd like you all to meet my son." The executives froze. No one moved. No one breathed.
Marcus Chen had built Vanguard tech on precision, control, and an unshakable belief that emotion was a liability. His corner office overlooked the bay, all glass and steel, a monument to the 30 years he'd spent climbing. He'd sacrificed marriages, friendships, and sleep. He'd told himself it was worth it. But the call that came at 8:15 on a Tuesday morning cracked the foundation he'd built. "Mr. Chen, this is Dr. Julian Reeves from Mercy General. I'm calling about a patient who listed you as next of kin." The voice was calm, professional, and faintly familiar in a way Marcus couldn't place. "She passed away last night. Complications from pneumonia. I thought you should know." Marcus gripped the edge of his desk. "Who?" "Angela Reeves, your former partner. She asked me to contact you if anything happened." The name hit him like a fist. Angela. 26 years ago, they'd been engaged. She'd been an art teacher, with paint perpetually under her nails, and he'd been a junior analyst with everything to prove. They'd broken up when he took the job in New York, when he chose the 80-hour weeks over the quiet life she wanted. He hadn't spoken to her in over 2 decades. "I'm sorry for your loss," Dr. Reeves continued. "There's something else. She left a letter for you. I can bring it by your office this afternoon if that works." Marcus agreed, barely hearing his own voice. The rest of the morning blurred. He canceled 2 meetings, ignored 4 emails, and stood at his window watching the fog roll over the water. Angela was gone. The thought felt unreal, like a headline about someone else's life. Dr. Reeves arrived at 2. Marcus expected an older man, maybe someone Angela had worked with at the hospital. Instead, a young doctor stepped into his office. Mid-20s, dark hair, steady gray eyes that reminded Marcus of someone he couldn't quite name. The man carried a manila envelope and a leather-bound notebook. "Mr. Chen, thank you for seeing me." Dr. Reeves extended his hand. His grip was firm, his expression unreadable. "I know this is difficult. Angela spoke about you often." Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. "You were her doctor." "Oncologist. I treated her for the last 3 years." Dr. Reeves set the envelope on the desk but kept the notebook in his lap. "She wanted you to have this. She wrote it a few months ago, when she knew time was running out." Marcus opened the envelope with unsteady hands. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten in Angela's looping script. The first page was gentle. Memories of their time together, regrets about how things ended, hope that he'd found happiness. The second page made his breath stop. "I need to tell you about Julian. He's your son, Marcus. I found out I was pregnant a month after you left for New York. I tried to reach you, but your assistant said you were too busy. I didn't push. I thought maybe it was better that way. Julian is 25 now. He's brilliant, kind, and nothing like the man I remember you being. I raised him to be better, but he deserves to know where he comes from. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and he's alone. Please don't abandon him twice." Marcus looked up. Dr. Reeves, Julian, was watching him with that same steady gaze. "You're my son." The words felt absurd, impossible. Marcus had no children. He'd made that choice deliberately, poured everything into his career instead. But the dates aligned. The resemblance was there, buried under features that must have come from Angela. The gray eyes were Marcus's mother's. "Yes." Julian's voice was even, betraying nothing. "She told me 2 years ago, when the cancer came back. I didn't want to disrupt your life, but she thought you should know." Marcus felt the room tilt. "Why didn't you contact me sooner?" Because you made it clear you didn't want to be contacted. Julian's tone stayed neutral, but something flickered in his expression. When I was 5, I had an emergency appendectomy. Angela couldn't afford the surgery. She called you, begged your assistant to put her through. You never called back. I remember sitting in that hospital waiting room, watching her cry on a payphone. She told me my father was too important to visit. So I stopped asking about you. The memory surfaced like a stone breaking water. Marcus was in London, finalizing the acquisition that made Vanguard a household name. His assistant had mentioned a call from an ex-girlfriend, something about a child. He'd dismissed it, assumed it was a scam or a desperate bid for money. He'd never followed up. Julian, Marcus didn't have words. Apologies felt too small, too late. I'm not here for an apology. Julian stood, closing the notebook he hadn't opened. I'm here because Angela asked me to give you a chance. She said people can change. I'm not sure I believe that, but I promised her I'd try. He pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the desk. I'll be in the city for another week, settling her estate. If you want to talk, call me. If not, I'll go back to Boston and we can both move on. Julian left without waiting for a response. Marcus sat alone in his office as the afternoon light faded, holding a letter from a woman he'd loved and lost, staring at a business card from a son he'd never known. What do you do when the past walks through your door and asks for a second chance?
Marcus didn't call that night, or the next morning. He told himself he needed time to process, to think clearly, but the truth was simpler. He was afraid. Afraid Julian would reject him. Afraid he'd say the wrong thing. Afraid that meeting his son would confirm what Angela's letter implied, that Marcus had wasted his life chasing something that didn't matter. But on the third day, Marcus found himself outside Mercy General at 6 in the morning, watching the hospital come to life. He'd looked up Julian's schedule, visiting hours, rounds, the small cafe across the street where doctors grabbed coffee between shifts. Marcus bought 2 lattes and waited. Julian emerged at 7:30, still in scrubs, exhaustion written in the set of his shoulders. He stopped when he saw Marcus standing by the entrance. "Mr. Chen?" Julian's tone was polite, distant. "I didn't expect to see you." "I wanted to talk." He held out one of the lattes. "If you have time." Julian hesitated, then took the coffee. "I have 15 minutes before rounds." They sat on a bench outside the hospital, the morning air cool and damp. Marcus didn't know where to start, so he asked the safest question he could think of. "How long have you been a doctor?" 3 years. I finished my residency in oncology last spring. I wanted to specialize in the thing that took my mother. Seemed like the least I could do. She'd be proud of you. Maybe. Julian's voice was flat. She spent most of my childhood working 2 jobs to pay for my education. I spent most of hers in medical school, too busy to visit as much as I should have. We both made choices. The parallel wasn't lost on Marcus. "I want to know you," he said quietly. "I know I don't deserve that chance, but I'm asking anyway." Julian turned to look at him, really look at him for the first time. "Why now? You had 25 years. "Because I was a coward. I was so focused on building something that mattered, I didn't realize I was destroying the things that actually did. Your mother tried to reach me. I didn't listen. I'm listening now." Julian was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "She kept a box of your old letters. Did you know that? From when you were engaged? She'd read them sometimes, when she was sick, when the treatment was bad. She'd tell me stories about the man you used to be, the one who stayed up all night helping her paint sets for school plays, who brought her coffee every morning, who promised her a life full of small, beautiful things." He looked away. "I don't know if that man still exists." "I don't know either," Marcus admitted, "but I'd like to find out." Julian finished his coffee and stood. "I'm helping sort through Angela's apartment this week. If you want to help,
you're welcome to join me. It's not glamorous, just packing boxes, going through old papers, but it's something. I'll be there. Marcus pulled out his phone. What's the address? He rattled it off, then paused. Fair warning, it's going to be hard. She kept everything. Photos, report cards, drawings I made in kindergarten. You'll see the life you missed. I know. Okay. Julian turned toward the hospital entrance, then looked back. One more thing. If you're doing this out of guilt, don't bother. I don't need a father who shows up because he feels obligated. I need someone who actually wants to be here. I want to be here, Marcus said, and meant it. Julian nodded once, then disappeared into the hospital. Marcus sat on the bench for another 10 minutes, staring at the address in his phone, feeling something unfamiliar uncurl in his chest. It might have been hope. Angela's apartment was a small one-bedroom in a neighborhood Marcus hadn't visited in years. The walls were covered in framed student artwork, the shelves crammed with books and plants. It smelled like lavender in old paper. Julian was already there when Marcus arrived, sitting on the floor surrounded by cardboard boxes. I started with the closet, he said without looking up. Clothes are going to charity. I'm keeping the jewelry. Nothing valuable, but she wore it all the time. Seemed wrong to throw it away. Marcus knelt beside him and picked up a sweater. Soft blue wool. He remembered buying it for Angela's birthday, a lifetime ago. She kept this. She kept a lot of things. Julian handed him a shoebox. This one's yours. Inside were Marcus's old letters, a ticket stub for their first date, a photo of them at a company picnic, both of them young, laughing, Marcus's arm around her shoulders. He looked happy in a way he hadn't been in decades. I forgot we took that, Marcus said quietly. She didn't. Julian pulled another box toward him, this one full of school projects and report cards. She used to tell me about you when I was little. I'd ask why you weren't around, and she'd say you were doing important work, saving the world or something. I believed her until I was old enough to realize that was just a nice way of saying, you didn't care. Marcus flinched. Julian. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to be honest. She set down a stack of drawings. Crooked houses, stick figure families, a child's version of the world. I spent a long time being angry at you. Then I spent a long time not thinking about you at all. Now you're here, and I don't know what to feel. That's fair. They worked in silence for a while, sorting and packing. Marcus found more pieces of his past, a cookbook he and Angela had used, a set of mugs they'd bought together, a framed photo of her laughing in a park. Each one felt like a small, sharp reminder of what he'd walked away from. She never dated anyone else, Julian said eventually. I used to ask why. She'd say she'd already had the love of her life and lightning doesn't strike twice. I thought that was romantic when I was a kid. As an adult, I just think it's sad. It is sad. Marcus carefully folded the blue sweater and set it in the donation box. I don't know how to make up for the time I lost, but I'd like to try. Julian looked at him, expression unreadable. Start by showing up. That's all she ever wanted from you.
Marcus began showing up. He met Julian for coffee before hospital rounds, helped pack up Angela's apartment on weekends, listened to stories about a childhood he'd missed. Julian was guarded, careful with his words, but slowly, so slowly Marcus almost missed it, the walls began to lower. They were sorting through Angela's books when Julian asked, "What do you actually do at Vanguard?" Marcus paused, holding a worn copy of a novel Angela had loved. "I'm the CEO. We develop software for healthcare systems, scheduling, patient records, communication platforms. It's not exciting, but it's stable. Mom said you were building something important. I thought I was. Marcus set the book in the keep pile. Now I'm not sure it was worth what I gave up. Julian didn't respond immediately. He pulled out another book, flipped through the pages, then said, "She had medical debt, a lot of it. The treatments were expensive, and insurance only covered so much. I helped where I could, but I was still paying off student loans. We managed, but barely." The words landed like a punch. "Why didn't you reach out? I could have what? Written a check?" That's not what she needed. She needed someone who cared enough to ask how she was doing, someone who remembered she existed. Marcus had no defense. He'd spent 30 years building a company, accumulating wealth he rarely spent, while Angela had struggled to afford the care that might have saved her life. The inequity was staggering. "I want to help now, with the debt, with funeral expenses, with anything you need. It's already handled. I'm not looking for charity. I just wanted you to know what her life was like while you were becoming successful." The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable. Marcus wanted to argue, to explain that he hadn't known, but the truth was, he hadn't tried to know. He'd made it easy for Angela to disappear from his life, and she had no choice but to accept it. "I'm sorry," Marcus said finally. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I am." Julian stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. "She forgave you, you know. Near the end, when she was writing that letter, she said she didn't want me to carry anger that wasn't mine. She said you'd been young and scared, and that people deserve second chances." He turned back to Marcus. "I'm trying to believe that, but you have to understand, trust isn't something I give easily." "I understand." "Do you?" Julian crossed his arms. "Because from where I'm standing, this feels temporary. You're here now because you feel guilty, but what happens when the guilt fades? When going back to your normal life is easier than maintaining a relationship with a son you never wanted?" The question hung in the air, sharp and necessary. Marcus could have deflected, could have offered empty reassurances. Instead, he said, "I don't know. I can't promise I won't mess this up, but I can promise I'll keep trying, even when it's hard." Julian studied him for a long moment. Then he said, "Okay, that's a start." They finished packing the books in silence, but it was a different kind of silence, less hostile, more contemplative. When they were done, Julian suggested they grab dinner at a small restaurant nearby, a place Angela had loved. Marcus agreed. The restaurant was cozy, dimly lit, with mismatched furniture and a menu scrawled on a chalkboard. Julian ordered for both of them: pasta with marinara, the house salad, bread that came warm and soft. "She brought me here every year on my birthday," he explained. "It was our tradition." "What else did you do? For birthdays, I mean." Julian smiled faintly, the first real smile Marcus had seen from him. "She'd make pancakes in the morning. Terrible pancakes, but I loved them. Then we'd go to the park or the museum or wherever I wanted. At night, she'd bake a cake from scratch, and we'd eat it while watching old movies. Nothing fancy, but it was ours." Marcus felt the weight of all the birthdays he'd missed, 25 years of pancakes and parks and homemade cakes. "She sounds like she was a wonderful mother." "She was." Julian's smile faded. "I wish you could have seen it." "So do I." The food arrived, and they ate slowly, trading small stories. Julian talked about medical school, the long hours and impossible exams, the patients who stayed with him long after their treatment ended. Marcus talked about the early days of Vanguard, the risks and failures, the moment everything finally clicked into place. It wasn't easy conversation, but it was real. Near the end of the meal, Julian said, "I have to go back to Boston in a few days. My life's there, my job, my apartment, my routine. But I'll be back in a month to finalize Angela's estate. If you want to stay in touch, I'm open to it." "I'd like that." He hesitated, then added, "And if you're ever willing, I'd like you to meet my team at Vanguard. Not as some grand introduction, just as someone I'm getting to know. No pressure." Julian considered it. Maybe. Let me think about it. They parted outside the restaurant, the night air cool and still. Marcus watched Julian walk away, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed in a way they hadn't been when they first met. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a door left open. Trust is built in moments too small to notice, until you look back and see how far you've come.
Julian returned to Boston, and for 3 weeks Marcus tried to maintain the fragile connection they'd built. They texted sporadically, updates about work, questions about the estate, small observations about their days. It wasn't much, but it was more than Marcus had expected. He began to hope that maybe, slowly, they could build something that mattered. Then Julian called on a Thursday evening, his voice tight. "I need to talk to you about something." Marcus set down the report he'd been reading. "What's wrong?" "I was going through Angela's medical bills. There's a discrepancy, a payment made 3 years ago, right when she started treatment. $50,000, anonymous donor, processed through Vanguard's corporate account." Julian's tone was careful, controlled. "Was that you?" Marcus's chest tightened. He'd made the donation after running into an old colleague who mentioned seeing Angela's name on a fundraising page. He'd contributed quietly, anonymously, because he didn't want credit. He just wanted to help. "Yes. I saw she was struggling, and I wanted to do something." "And you didn't tell her?" "I didn't think she'd accept it if she knew it came from me." Julian was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You're right. She wouldn't have. She had too much pride." "But that doesn't make it okay, Marcus. You don't get to swoop in and play savior without giving her a choice." "I wasn't trying to play savior. I was trying to help." "By keeping secrets? By deciding what she needed without asking?" Julian's voice rose slightly. "You did the same thing 30 years ago. Decided her life wasn't important enough to be part of. Decided you knew better. And now you're doing it again. That's not fair. Isn't it?" Julian exhaled sharply. "Look, I appreciate what you did. That money probably bought her another year. But it doesn't change the fact that you made a unilateral decision about her life without including her. That's the problem, Marcus. It's always been the problem." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "Maybe you were. But the right thing done the wrong way is still wrong." Julian's tone softened slightly. "I need some time to think. I'll call you when I'm ready." The line went dead. Marcus sat in his office, staring at his phone, feeling the progress they'd made crumble. He'd been so focused on fixing things, on proving he could be better, that he'd repeated the same mistake, acting without communicating, deciding without consulting. Julian was right. Marcus had spent his whole life making choices for other people, convinced he knew best, and it had cost him everything. The next 2 weeks were silent. Marcus texted once, a simple apology, but Julian didn't respond. Marcus threw himself into work, the way he always did when life became too complicated. But it didn't help. The office felt hollow, the meetings felt pointless. He kept thinking about Julian's words, "You don't get to swoop in and play savior without giving her a choice." Finally, Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He called his assistant and cleared his schedule for a week. Then, he booked a flight to Boston. He didn't tell Julian he was coming. He wasn't sure Julian would want to see him, but he couldn't sit in San Francisco waiting for permission to try again. He had to show up, the way Julian had asked him to from the beginning. Julian's apartment was in a modest building near the hospital, the kind of place where residents and young doctors lived before they could afford something better. Marcus stood outside for 10 minutes, rehearsing what he'd say, before finally pressing the buzzer. Julian answered the door in jeans and a faded t-shirt, surprise flickering across his face. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I came to apologize, in person." Marcus shifted his weight, suddenly uncertain. "Can I come in?" Julian hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was small but tidy, bookshelves lining the walls, a couch draped with a blanket, a kitchen table covered in medical journals. It reminded Marcus of Angela's place, full of quiet warmth. I've been thinking about what you said, Marcus began, standing awkwardly near the door. You're right. I made a decision about Angela's life without asking her. I thought I was helping, but I was really just doing what I've always done, controlling things because it's easier than being vulnerable. Julian leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. Okay. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be someone's father, how to build a relationship from nothing. I'm going to make mistakes, but I want to make them with you, not around you. I want to ask questions instead of assuming answers. I want to listen instead of fixing. Julian was quiet for a moment, then said, Why now? You've had weeks to say this. Because I realized I can't do this over the phone or through texts. If I'm going to show up, I need to actually show up. So I'm here. And I'm asking, can we try again? Julian looked at him, expression unreadable, then walked to the couch and sat down. Sit. Marcus sat. Here's the thing, Julian said slowly. I want to believe you've changed. I want to believe this isn't just guilt or obligation, but I need proof. I need consistency. I need to see that you're willing to put in the work even when it's uncomfortable. I am. Then prove it. Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Stay in Boston for a few days. Not in a hotel, here, on my couch. Come to the hospital, see what my life actually looks like. Meet my friends. Eat bad takeout, and talk about things that don't matter. If you can do that, if you can exist in my world without trying to fix it or control it, then maybe we have a shot. Marcus felt a flicker of fear. This was the opposite of everything he was comfortable with. Unstructured, uncontrolled, uncertain. But that was exactly the point. Okay. I'll stay. Julian nodded slowly. Okay. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is stop fixing and start just being present.
Marcus stayed in Boston for 5 days. He slept on Julian's couch, which was too short and left him with a stiff neck. He drank weak coffee from a machine in the hospital cafeteria and learned the names of Julian's colleagues. Dr. Patel, who told terrible jokes, Nurse Chen, who ran the oncology floor with quiet efficiency, Dr. Okoye, who'd been Julian's mentor during residency. He sat in the waiting room during Julian's rounds, watching families hold vigil, and felt the weight of what his son did every day. On the third night, Julian came home exhausted, collapsing on the couch beside Marcus. Rough day? Marcus asked. Lost the patient. Kid, 12 years old. Leukemia. We thought we had it under control, but Julian trailed off, rubbing his face. Some days I wonder if I'm making any difference at all. Marcus didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer platitudes or solutions. He just said, I'm sorry. That's really hard. Julian looked at him surprised. That's it? No pep talk about how I'm saving lives? You know you're saving lives. You don't need me to tell you that. Marcus shifted to face him. But knowing it doesn't make losing someone hurt less. So I'm just sorry you had a hard day. Julian's expression softened. Thanks. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt less like absence and more like companionship. Eventually, Julian said, You're different than I expected. Different how? Quieter? More willing to just be? Julian smiled faintly. I thought you'd spend the whole week trying to impress me or prove something, but you're just here. Is that okay? Yeah. Julian leaned back, closing his eyes. It's okay. The next morning, Julian took Marcus to the park where Angela used to bring him on birthdays. It was small, tucked between buildings, with a playground and a pond where ducks gathered. They walked slowly, hands in pockets, watching the early light filter through the trees. She'd sit on that bench, and I'd run around until I was exhausted. Then we'd get ice cream, even in winter. She said life was too short to wait for the right season. She always said things like that, Marcus remembered. She used to tell me I was too serious, that I needed to learn to enjoy things as they happened. Did you? No. I kept thinking there'd be time later, after I closed the next deal, after I secured the next funding round. but later never came. Julian turned to him. It's here now. I know. I don't want to waste it. They stood there for a moment, the city waking up around them, and Marcus felt something shift. Not forgiveness, that would take time, but maybe the beginning of understanding. On the 5th day, Julian suggested Marcus meet his team at the hospital. Not as some big introduction, Julian clarified, just as someone who's visiting. They know about you. I told them after Angela died. They'll have questions. Marcus agreed, nervous in a way he hadn't been in decades. He'd faced boardrooms full of investors, negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, but the thought of meeting his son's colleagues terrified him. These were people who knew Julian, who'd see through any pretense. The meeting was casual, coffee in the break room, quick introductions, easy conversation about hospital politics and weekend plans. Dr. Patel asked what Marcus did, and he explained Vanguard's work. Nurse Chen asked how long he was staying, and he said he wasn't sure yet. Dr. Okoye, who'd been Julian's mentor during residency, asked, "So you're Julian's father?" Marcus glanced at Julian, who nodded slightly. "Yes, I am." "Good," Dr. Okoye said simply. "He deserves someone who shows up." Later, as they left the hospital, Julian said, "That went well. They're protective of you." "They are. I'm lucky." "I'm glad you came, Marcus. I wasn't sure I would be, but I am." Marcus felt something warm unfold in his chest. "Me too." Julian flew back to San Francisco with Marcus the following week. It wasn't a permanent move, just a visit, a chance to see where Marcus lived and worked. Marcus gave him a tour of Vanguard's offices, introduced him to the executive team, showed him the projects they were developing. Julian asked thoughtful questions, pointed out ways the software could better serve doctors, suggested improvements Marcus hadn't considered. "You'd be good at this," Marcus said, as they stood in the conference room overlooking the bay. "Maybe," Julian smiled, "but I like what I do. I like being with patients, seeing the impact up close. Your work matters, but it's not for me." "I respect that." On Julian's last night in San Francisco, Marcus hosted a small dinner at his house, a space he rarely used, too big and too empty for one person. He cooked, badly, burning the vegetables and overcooking the pasta. Julian laughed, a real laugh that lit up his whole face, and ordered pizza instead. They ate on the back patio, watching the sun set over the water. "I've been thinking," Julian said, picking out a slice, "about what comes next, for us." Marcus set down his pizza. "And?" "I want to keep trying. It won't always be easy, and there'll be times when we frustrate each other, but I think it's worth it." Julian looked at him, steady and serious. "I think you're worth it." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I'm going to hold you to this. Regular visits, phone calls that aren't just check-ins, actual effort. If you disappear again, that's it. No third chances." "Understood." Julian smiled. "Good. Now help me figure out what to do with all of Angela's stuff. I can't keep storing it in my apartment forever." They spent the evening going through photos on Julian's phone, making plans for a memorial Angela would have liked, something small and meaningful, with her favorite music and the people she'd loved. Marcus offered to help organize it, and Julian accepted. They talked about creating a scholarship in her name, something for art teachers or medical students, a way to honor the life she'd lived. As the night grew late, and Julian prepared to head back to his hotel, he paused at the door. "Hey, Marcus." "Yeah?" "Thanks for not giving up." Julian's voice was soft, almost shy. "It means something." Marcus didn't trust himself to speak, so he just nodded. Julian smiled, then left, and Marcus stood alone in his too-big house, feeling less alone than in 30 years. 3 months later, Marcus walked into the Vanguard boardroom holding Julian's hand. Not literally, but the metaphor held. Julian wore a visitor's badge and a slightly nervous expression. The executive stared, frozen, as Marcus said, "I'd like you all to meet my son." The room was silent, stunned, until the CFO broke into applause, and the rest followed. Julian smiled, small and uncertain, and Marcus felt something powerful and fragile settle into place, the beginning of a family he'd almost destroyed, rebuilt one choice at a time. Later, in Marcus's office, Julian looked out at the bay and said, "She would have liked this, you trying.
Us trying. I hope so, Marcus said quietly. I know so. Julian turned to face him. She kept those letters because she believed people could change. I think she was right. Marcus thought about Angela's words, about second chances and lightning striking twice. He thought about the life he'd built and the one he'd abandoned. And he thought about the sun standing in front of him, offering grace Marcus didn't deserve but would spend the rest of his life earning. I think she was right too, Marcus said. Outside, the fog rolled over the water, soft and endless, the way it always did. But inside, something new was taking shape. Imperfect, uncertain, but undeniably real.